Beneath the fractured glow of a shattered moon, the mercenary band of alien assassins gathered in the ruins of an abandoned fortress. Their leader, a chitinous brute named Sarek, laughed with his mandibles wide, the sound sharp as broken glass. Before them, chained and slumped against a pillar of black stone, sat the figure they had been promised was humanity's last weapon, a relic dug out of a forgotten vault. He looked far too ordinary. His skin was weathered, his hair iron-gray, his muscles lean but scarred from 100 campaigns that none of the assassins believed could be real. His wrists were bound, his head tilted as though he slept. "This," Sarek sneered, pacing before the prisoner. "This brittle skeleton is the terror of empires? The stories exaggerate. He smells of rust and dust." The others chittered with mocking laughter, their blades flashing in the dim light. They had expected something monstrous, some towering engine of flesh and steel. Instead, they found only a man whose silence unnerved them more than his presence should. The prisoner opened his eyes slowly, as if the act required no urgency. His gaze was steady, unnervingly calm. One of the assassins spat acidic saliva near his feet, eager to provoke a response, but the man only studied them, like a teacher might regard insolent children. He finally spoke, his voice rough yet controlled, carrying the cadence of someone long accustomed to command. "You've come a very long way," he said. "And for what? To mock what you do not understand." Sarek snarled, stabbing a talon toward him. "You are a ruin of a species, human. The galaxy thrives without your kind. You are legend only because corpses cannot speak. We were sent to erase what remains of you, to scatter your ashes into the void." The man tilted his head, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. He seemed almost amused. "I remember when your kind was still learning how to sharpen metal," he said softly. "I've fought wars before your suns burned bright. Tell me, little hunters, what name did they give you when they warned you of me?" The assassins hesitated. They had heard fragments, whispers, campfire tales told even among species that despised humanity. But legends were not facts, and Sarek wanted none of this talk to sway his soldiers. He clicked his mandibles again, louder this time. "Do not be fooled. He is a fossil. There is no power left in him. His time has ended." The prisoner's eyes narrowed, and with deliberate slowness he straightened his back, the motion making chains creak against stone. Despite his confinement, there was a gravity about him now, a reminder that a predator does not need freedom to exude danger. His voice dropped to a murmur that carried across the chamber. "They used to call me many things. Warrior, executioner. But I had one name that even your kind remembers, though you pretend otherwise." He leaned forward, letting the silence stretch until the assassins shifted uneasily. "Planet Killer." The laughter died instantly. The word hung heavy like a toxin in the air. Several of the assassins froze, recalling stories their elders had muttered in hushed tones, stories they had dismissed as myth. Worlds burning under a single man's command. Fleets scattered by tactics no machine could predict. A soldier who did not simply win wars, but ended civilizations. Sarek faltered for the first time, the edges of his arrogance fraying. The prisoner, Planet Killer, watched the tremor ripple through them. "You came to mock me," he said, his smirk fading into something colder, older. "But you don't mock a storm. You only pray it does not turn your way." His chains rattled once as he flexed his hands, and every assassin present felt, deep in the marrow of their bones, that the chains were not to hold him, but to restrain the galaxy from him. In the silence that followed, Sarek tried to gather his voice, but it emerged thin and brittle. "You cannot frighten us with ancient names," he snapped, though his eyes betrayed the lie. "We are not prey." The man leaned back against the pillar, his calm restored. "Then come closer," he invited. "Prove it." None did. The tension in the chamber grew thick enough to choke. The assassins, who moments before had laughed at an old man, now stood uncertain, each one calculating the cost of underestimating him. The air seemed charged, as though the fortress itself waited to see which side would make the first mistake. Sareka's blade twitched in his grasp, but his soldiers no longer shared his appetite for cruelty. They had learned the man's name, and names, as all hunters knew, had power. The prisoner closed his eyes again, as though satisfied that the truth had been re-established. He spoke almost as if to himself, but his words were clear enough for all to hear. "You should have killed me before you learned what I was. Now it is too late for laughter." The silence pressed heavier, and in that weight lay the promise that the story was only beginning. The fortress trembled with the weight of silence. Sarek shifted his stance, unwilling to admit the unease coiling through his limbs. His assassins, once bold and jeering, now avoided the prisoner's gaze as if to meet his eyes was to risk awakening some buried force. The man had named himself, and though it was only a word, it carried a history none of them could quite dismiss. Sarek could feel their hesitation turning to cracks in discipline. He would have to act before their fear unraveled his command. "Do not let this relic poison your minds," he barked, clacking his mandibles with irritation.
"He is a man.
Flesh, bone, weakness. That is all." Yet even as he spoke, Sarek knew he was not convincing himself. Legends did not survive millennia by accident. There was a reason his elders whispered about the planet killer when recounting the dark ages of the galaxy. Sarek had dismissed those tales as superstition, but now the weight of them pressed coldly against his exoskeleton. The prisoner shifted his wrists, chains groaning as metal strained under subtle pressure. He did not rise, did not lunge, but his mere movement pulled every alien's focus toward him. His composure was unnerving, as if he had sat through this scene countless times before. "You think power is in the arm that swings the blade," he murmured, his voice steady, his tone almost patient. "But true power lies in the knowledge that no blade can stop what comes after me." One of the younger assassins, too frightened to mask his trembling, lunged forward with a plasma-edged spear. His strike was precise, fueled by desperation to dispel the dread, but the prisoner tilted his head just slightly. The weapon struck the pillar instead, sparks showering as the tip glanced off stone. Before the assassin could retreat, the prisoner's chain-wrapped arm snapped upward, striking the shaft. With a motion so fluid it seemed inevitable, the spear spun free, clattering across the floor. The young alien stumbled back, clutching his bruised claws, his confidence shattered. The others recoiled. None spoke, but the message was clear. Even bound, the human was dangerous. Sareka's rage flared, but beneath it churned something uglier. Fear of losing control, fear of confirming the legend with his own eyes. He barked a command, forcing 3 more assassins to advance together. Their weapons rose in unison, blades and stingers poised for a synchronized strike. The prisoner did not resist. He sat still, watching them approach. And when they struck, chains moved faster than expected, whirling with precision. Metal snapped against weapons, redirected blows into one another. The assassins' attack collapsed into chaos, their own strikes turned against their allies. A shriek echoed as one fell, bleeding from a friendly blade. Another was thrown into a crumbling wall, dust clouding the chamber. When the storm of motion ended, the prisoner remained seated, his breathing even, his chains coiled like serpents at his sides. The survivors staggered back, their bravado extinguished. Sarek hissed at them, furious. Pathetic. He is still a prisoner, but his voice betrayed strain. Every strike, every subtle flex of movement reminded him that the man before them was not improvising. He was remembering, replaying patterns of violence carved into muscle and memory from wars older than their empire. "You've already lost," the prisoner said quietly. His words cut deeper than any blade. "Not because you cannot kill me. You might if you tried hard enough. But because you've revealed your fear. And fear," he paused, letting his eyes pass across them, "is the beginning of defeat." Sareka's claws clicked against the hilt of his blade. He wanted blood. He wanted to prove the prisoner wrong. But each time he envisioned stepping forward, he remembered the stories, entire fleets dismantled by human cunning, planets rendered uninhabitable through strategies no alien mind would dare conceive. The planet killer did not simply fight. He ended. That was what the legend said, and Sarek could not banish the weight of those words. Still, he forced himself forward, towering over the chained man. His mandibles spread in a show of defiance. "You claim power and fear, human, but I see only an aging carcass pretending to be dangerous. You speak of wars no one remembers. Perhaps I should carve open your chest and scatter your heart to the dust. Then we shall see what remains of your myth." The man tilted his head up, his expression unreadable. He spoke with chilling simplicity. "If you do that, Sarek, you'll awaken the others." The name sent a ripple through the assassins. Sarek froze mid-breath, his blade halting inches from the human's chest. The others exchanged uneasy glances. The others? None dared ask aloud, but the implications sank into them like poison. Had humanity left more than one survivor? Were there more of these warriors hidden in forgotten vaults, waiting? Or worse, had this man already set events in motion that their arrival could not stop? The prisoner's smile returned, faint but terrible. "You thought I was the last. That's why you were sent, yes? To erase the past before it stirs. But you've come too late. Even now, the galaxy remembers." The fortress groaned, a sound like deep stone shifting far below. Dust trickled from the ceiling as if the ruins themselves responded to his words. The assassins recoiled, some stepping back toward the doorway, unwilling to stay. Sarek felt control slip further with every heartbeat. The man leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper that forced them to lean closer. "Planet Killer is not a title. It is a warning." And then he fell silent, closing his eyes once more, leaving them with nothing but the echo of his words and the growing dread that they had stumbled into a trap far larger than any of them understood. The assassins dared not move. Sarek clenched his weapon, torn between pride and the creeping certainty that they were already part of a story they would not survive. The silence stretched, suffocating, until it became clear. Nothing would end here, not yet. The true beginning had only just been spoken into motion. Sareka's grip tightened on the blade until the hilt groaned under his strength. His instinct screamed at him to strike, to silence the man before his words infected the rest of his assassins. But the memory of those two syllables, Planet Killer, gnawed at his resolve. The title was not spoken lightly across the stars. Even in whispered stories told to hatchlings, it carried the weight of doom. Sarek could see the doubt festering in his squad's eyes, a doubt that threatened to unravel years of hardened discipline. He had to act. "Restrain him fully," Sarek ordered, voice sharp as a blade. "If he breaks free, your lives are forfeit." Two assassins obeyed reluctantly, dragging chains heavier than the first set and wrapping them around the man's chest, arms, and legs until he seemed more statue than soldier. Yet even bound so completely, he radiated the unsettling calm of someone certain of the outcome. His eyes followed each assassin as they worked, not with malice, but with a measured curiosity that made them avert their gaze. When the final shackle clamped shut, Sarek stepped closer. "You are no storm," he hissed. "You are a corpse waiting for its final rest. Do you understand why we came, human? It was not for vengeance. It was not for glory. It was to erase you, to prove that your kind left nothing behind that could threaten us again." The man's lips curved into a faint smile. "Then you've already failed. To prove I am nothing, you first had to remember I existed. And memory is dangerous. It spreads faster than fire." A murmur rippled through the assassins. Sarek silenced them with a glare, but the damage was done. Every word the human spoke seemed to plant seeds of unrest. Sarek could not allow him to control the rhythm of this confrontation. He had to force action. With a sudden motion, Sarek drove his blade forward, plunging it through the prisoner's shoulder and pinning him against the stone. The sound of metal grinding against bone reverberated in the chamber. The assassins flinched at the brutality, but the man did not scream. His breath hitched, his jaw tightened, yet his eyes never left Sareka's. "You think this hurts me," he rasped, voice strained but steady. "But pain is nothing compared to what I have endured. I buried my people. I watched worlds burn. Do you know what becomes of a man who has lost everything but his purpose? His gaze sharpened, and for the first time Sarek felt something stir inside him that he could not smother. Fear. He becomes inevitable. The stone behind the man cracked as he strained against the chains. The fortress itself seemed to groan in protest, dust and debris cascading from the ceiling. The assassin staggered back, weapons raised, but none dared approach. Sarek ripped his blade free, determined to keep the upper hand, yet he could not shake the dread blooming in his chest. The human lowered his head, blood seeping down his arm. His voice dropped to a low growl. You want to see why they called me Planet Killer? You think it was because of weapons or fleets or armies?
No.
It was because when I rose, empires fell. Not by my strength alone, but because I was the spark that lit every fuse. I was the reminder that humanity does not kneel. A sudden vibration rumbled beneath the chamber, faint at first, then growing in intensity. The walls shook as though some ancient engine had awakened below. Sarek spun, mandibles flaring. What is this? What have you done? The man lifted his head, his eyes burning with grim satisfaction. I told you. You should have killed me before you learned my name. Now every whisper of fear you carry feeds the signal. One of the younger assassins shrieked, his nerve breaking. He's summoning something. We must end him now. He raised his weapon, but Sarek slashed the air with his claw. No, he snapped. Killing the human now felt perilous, as though it would unleash something worse. Yet hesitation was a poison, and Sarek knew it was spreading through them faster than he could contain. The floor buckled, cracks splitting the stone. From the depths below came a hum, resonant and ancient, vibrating through their carapaces. The assassins stumbled, some dropping to their knees as the sound grew. Sarek glared at the prisoner, but the human only leaned back against his chains, bleeding, broken, and yet impossibly victorious in his stillness. You thought I was the last, he said, his voice steady despite the wound. But the galaxy remembers. And memory is the one enemy you cannot kill. The hum crescendoed into a thunderous roar. Light burst from the fractures in the ground, searing white and impossibly bright. The assassins shielded their eyes, their discipline collapsing into panic. Sarek shouted commands, but his words were lost in the cacophony. The man's voice cut through the chaos, quiet yet unmistakable. The war begins anew. The chain shattered. Stone exploded outward as the chamber was consumed by light. The last thing Sarek saw before the brilliance swallowed him was the human rising to his feet, no longer prisoner, but conqueror reborn. The fortress screamed as ancient machinery tore free of its slumber, and the assassins realized too late that they had not come to erase the past. They had come to awaken it. The fortress walls buckled as if struck by the fists of titans. Rubble cascaded in choking clouds, the air thick with the acrid tang of ancient machinery awakening after centuries of silence. Sarek staggered, his claws digging into the floor to remain upright, while his assassins scrambled in disarray. Their discipline, once precise, lethal, dissolved into panic. Through the maelstrom of dust and light, the human stepped forward. The chains that had once bound him clattered uselessly at his feet, their links warped and shattered. Blood still streaked his arm, but the wound seemed an afterthought, dwarfed by the terrible gravity of his presence. His every motion radiated inevitability, as though the storm erupting around them answered not to chance, but to him. Sareka's mandibles snapped in fury, trying to mask the gnawing terror inside. "Kill him," he roared, his voice ragged. "Kill him before this madness consumes us." 3 assassins obeyed, their blades whistling through the haze as they charged. But the human moved with brutal economy, each gesture born of a soldier who had fought wars before their species had learned to crawl. A chain fragment whipped from his grasp, striking one assailant across the throat with bone-crushing force. Another strike was sidestepped, his own momentum turned against him until his blade lodged deep in the chest of his ally. The last assassin tried to retreat, but a single step from the human drove him backward into the collapsing wall, the fortress itself swallowing his scream. The others faltered, weapons trembling in their hands. Sarek barked at them again, but the conviction in his voice was gone. He could see it in their eyes. They no longer believed they were predators. They had become prey. The human's gaze swept across them, unhurried, dissecting their fear with surgical precision. "This was never a fight," he said, his voice low, carrying through the chaos. "You thought you were executioners. But you are witnesses." "Witnesses to what?" Sarek spat, though his blade wavered. The human's eyes, cold and unyielding, met his. "The end of your illusion." The galaxy told itself humanity was gone. "You came here to make certain. But now the truth spreads. We endure." As if to punctuate his words, the fortress convulsed. A deep rumble shook the ground, followed by the grinding roar of colossal gears turning. From beneath the shattered floor rose structures of metal and stone, towers etched with human war script glowing faintly in the dust-choked air. The assassins stumbled back, their antennae quivering with terror. Sarek recognized none of it, but instinct told him these were weapons not meant for his understanding. The human stood before it all, framed by light and ruin, as though the awakening of this place was his coronation. "Impossible," Sarek whispered, though the word tasted hollow. "Your kind was extinguished. Your fleet shattered. Your world salted with fire." The man's smirk returned, faint and bitter. "You should know better than most. Extinction is not an event. It is a war. And wars are never over until the last soldier falls." Sareka's assassins broke. One after another, they fled into the ruins, their weapons discarded, their courage dissolved. Only Sarek remained, his pride chaining him more effectively than any steel. He refused to run, though every instinct howled at him to escape. The human stepped closer, each footfall deliberate, unhurried. "Do you understand now why they feared me? Why your elders whispered my name?" His voice grew sharper, cutting away Sareka's defenses. "It was never about what I destroyed. It was about what I represented. Humanity's refusal to vanish quietly. We are the echo that becomes thunder." Sarek raised his blade in a final, defiant gesture. "Then strike, human. But know this, I do not kneel." For the first time, the man's expression softened. Not pity, not admiration. Something harder, forged of experience. "Then you'll be remembered," he said. And with a motion too fast for Sarek to follow, the blade was knocked aside, his body slammed against the wall with the force of an avalanche. The fortress swallowed Sarek in debris, leaving only silence where his defiance had stood. The chamber dimmed, the light from the awakened machines stabilizing into a steady glow. The man stood alone amidst the ruin, his chest rising with controlled breaths. His eyes, distant and cold, were not fixed on the fallen assassins but beyond, on a war that stretched farther than this fortress, farther than this world. He whispered to no one, yet his words carried as if the stones themselves were listening. They thought it ended. They thought wrong. And as the fortress's ancient systems roared fully to life, a signal pulsed outward into the void, carrying a name across the stars, a name every civilization thought buried, but which would now return to haunt them. Planet Killer. The galaxy would soon remember.